Hello. Thanks for attending our session today. My name is Emily Fleece, and together with my co-presenter Penny Jones, today we will introduce two online units that we've developed, both of which deal with sustainability topics, specifically creating biodiverse backyards and the challenges of living with wildfire. We will discuss how we designed the units and why we think they may be having an impact on the sustainability knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors of students, and how we're exploring that impact through research and progress. In the lead up to the global COP26 UN Climate Change Conference and the ongoing discussion about what we can do to slow human impacts on planetary systems, I don't think I will shock anyone by saying that humanity today has a sustainability problem. Human-driven biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution, social inequity, and overconsumption are incompatible with a healthy future for humanity. And while our politicians are bickering over net zero timelines and emissions targets, educators and researchers are thinking of other and hopefully more effective ways to contribute. We believe that education focused on sustainability knowledge and practices can be one of the leverage points for sustainability, where small changes can have big impacts. But to do that, sustainability education must do more than just transmit knowledge about sustainability. It must also motivate and empower students to make active behavioral changes in how they live their lives and how they contribute to sustainability practices at an individual and community level. Now, sustainability is a contested and complex concept. So before we jump into the design of our units and the research process, we want to acknowledge our backgrounds and how it has shaped our understanding of sustainability and our approach to teaching and this research project. So first, Penny and I were both raised in developed Western nations in relatively privileged environments with good access to education and other resources. The culture, community, and education system we experienced all shaped our understanding of sustainability and how we see our role in creating a sustainable society. Penny and I could both be described as early career researchers or postdocs at the University of Tasmania. We both completed our PhDs less than 5 years ago and have been largely employed in research-focused roles since then. We both broadly do research at the intersection of ecology and public health, and we co-lead the Healthy Landscapes Research Group, where our interdisciplinary team looks at the relationships between the health of people and the health of the environment. We both care deeply about the environment and about creating healthy people and communities. In our spare time, we both do a lot of science communication and community engagement and have hosted and co-hosted many events that try to combine these things. For example, we are co-hosting Science in the Dark and Science in the Park events in a few weeks, and those are designed to help people connect with nature and community through public, educational, nature-based events. You may notice that this background does not include extensive formal training in teaching. As often happens in academia, we came to teaching from research. In designing these units, we drew heavily on our experiences in science communication and hosting community science events, and on the expertise of other educators and practitioners. We have sort of retrospectively been trying to understand the theory behind the design and are trying to incorporate evidence-based practice into our teaching. So 2 years ago, we were offered the opportunity, I think we're one behind, there we go. 2 years ago, we were offered the opportunity to develop 2 units about sustainability as part of the University of Tasmania's new fully online Diploma of Sustainable Living, which aims to offer highly accessible foundation and first-year level units communicating sustainability science and sustainability practices. It seemed like a great way to combine our personal passion for sustainability and harness our science communication and community engagement skills and fulfill our desire to support healthy people and environments. But there was a catch. The units had to be fully online. Now, we've both seen firsthand the transformational potential of learning about nature and place. I taught outdoor education for 2 years and know firsthand the smiles, excitement, and curiosity generated through learning about a forest or soil ecosystem. How through connecting with the environment and caring about plants and animals, it can change the way people behave, both towards nature and towards one another. But we wondered, how can you create these powerful, in-person, hands-on experiences through an online curriculum? This led to 3 questions for us. Can the benefits of place-based experiential learning be delivered effectively in a large-scale, fully online unit? And if so, how can online units facilitate authentic experiential learning to foster student understanding and agency in sustainable practices? Then, putting our researcher hats on, we asked how we can test whether the units are having the impacts that we intend. Over the rest of the presentation, we will now introduce the 2 units and step through their design, the theory behind it, and the research study that aims to test their impacts.
Thanks, Emily. So I'll now introduce the units themselves. And as we've mentioned, both units are offered as part of the University of Tasmania's Diploma of Sustainable Living, which has cohorts primarily consisting of non-traditional adult learners. Just to briefly introduce the pedagogical framework that the diploma provides for our units, I'd like to make 2 key overarching points. First, the diploma's emphasis on highly practical learning that encourages students to apply sustainability concepts to their daily lives. And second, the use of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a normative sustainability framework. And these are reflected in the course learning outcomes outlined here, to identify opportunities to contribute to sustainable living by reflecting on the choices you make in your life, to design pathways to a sustainable future for communities with networks of social practice around sustainable living, and to explain the impact of your day-to-day activities and decisions on contributing to the global agenda of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And both of our units have been designed to align with these course-level learning outcomes. Backyard Biodiversity, which is the unit that Emily developed, within this framework aims to inspire appreciation, understanding and care for the biodiversity that we encounter in our daily lives. It provides a grounding in the science of biodiversity, builds skills in observation and identification of biodiversity, and addresses highly applied questions about how to best support biodiversity in your own backyard habitat. Its ILOs, as outlined here, include explaining the value of biodiversity using that framework of the UN SDGs, quantifying the biodiversity and habitat present in your local environment, creating solutions for living in biodiverse environments, and developing the skills to manage the biodiversity of your specific local environment. Living with Fire, the unit that I developed, addresses the complex questions of how to live well with wildfire on an increasingly flammable continent. It challenges students to ask, what does a sustainable coexistence with fire even look like? And what might we need to do as individuals and communities to achieve that? Its ILOs include explaining the effects of wildfire and fire management on biodiversity and landscapes, describing the effect of fire behaviour on fire management and emergency response, analysing strategies for creating sustainable communities in fire-prone landscapes, and identifying locally appropriate options to manage individual wildfire risk. And while our units cover quite different topics from a disciplinary perspective, both of them are situated within that framework of the diploma's course learning outcomes, with a goal not only of increasing knowledge and skills relevant to sustainability, but really seeking to enable and empower students to contribute actively to sustainability at an individual and community level. And both share some very similar design characteristics. In particular, our unit design in both cases seeks to encourage the practical application of new knowledge and skills through personally relevant experiential learning, grounded within the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework to encourage abstract conceptualization of the complex, multifaceted and often contested nature of sustainability challenges. And today our core focus is that particular aspect of personally relevant experiential learning. As Emily noted earlier, neither of us came to unit design with formal training in education theory, but instead designed our units as best as we could with input and guidance from experienced educators and practitioners. And in that way, we designed our units with that strong focus on experiential learning. Now, in seeking to understand the theoretical basis of what we're doing, we found that our approach aligns well with Kolb's theory of experiential learning, and I'll use that framework to describe our units today. So this image here describes Kolb's cycle of experiential learning. It sets out 4 stages of experiential learning: concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Concrete experience is where a learner gets a new experience or interprets a past experience in a new way. Reflective observation is where the learner reflects personally and critically on that experience. Abstract conceptualization happens as the learner forms new ideas or adjusts their thinking based on the experience and their reflection. And then active experimentation happens as the learner forms new ideas or adjusts their thinking based on both the experience and their reflection, and then applies the new ideas to the world around them. And Kolb argues that effective learning is seen as the learner goes through this cycle, spiralling in ever-deepening cycles of learning. And both of our units have been designed in ways that encourage authentic, deep, experiential learning through the use of all of these 4 stages. I'll give you some specific examples to give you a flavour of that over the next few slides, but as a summary of our overall approach, after early introduction of the Sustainable Development Goals, we use experiential place-based backyard activities to help students apply these global concepts locally. We incorporate specific tasks to prompt active reflection on the connections between their concrete experience and global and local sustainability, and encourage abstract conceptualization, primarily using the SDG lens. The final assessment projects are based on active experimentation to solidify learnings and convert knowledge into local practice. So just to give you a few examples from Living with Fire, the concrete experiences involved in the unit include practical backyard activities, looking at things like fuel hazard and planet adaptations to bushfire, but also a lot of experiences relating to stories and emotion. For example, we have a module on fire in the arts and give students the experience of viewing bushfire-related art, film and dance. Importantly, as well as these facilitated experience, the unit also explicitly draws on the non-facilitated experience that all of my students already bring. The unit then includes a very rich suite of reflective activities. Some of these are written prompts for students to self-reflect, for example, on the messages they took away about fire from the artworks and how the artworks link back to some of the things we've covered in the unit. Abstract conceptualization is encouraged through activities such as concept mapping of unit material, linking and mapping the connections between the unit content and the Sustainable Development Goals. Other activities include creative conceptualization, for example, asking students to draw or creatively describe their vision of a sustainable future with wildfire. And finally, the capstone of the unit is an assessment task that asks students to devise and justify locally appropriate strategies to increase the bushfire resilience of their own home and backyard. In a similar way, backyard biodiversity includes a range of practical backyard activities early on, providing that concrete experience. Reflective activities are used liberally to help students make sense of that experience, for example, by reflecting on what they discovered and felt through their backyard surveys. Abstract conceptualization is encouraged, again, through activities such as the SDG framework, and the capstone of the unit being a final assessment task, challenging students to integrate their experiences, reflections, and new knowledge, and apply all of that to develop a backyard biodiversity management plan. So that's just a bit of a taster of how our units use those phases of Kolb's cycle to promote experiential learning. I'll now hand back to Emily, who will explain why we think this approach might help to encourage new sustainability practices and also how we're aiming to test that impact.
Thanks, Thanks, Penny. So Cohen and Uito in 2014 proposed a framework for assessing sustainability programs in higher education. One of the dimensions of that framework is human capabilities assessment, which considers things like the graduate's competencies and career motivations. They state, participants and funders expect education to matter for societal outcomes. After graduation, academic program evaluators are interested in whether practitioners actually use their capabilities in ways that improve sustainability in the world. And that is what we want to see for our students. And it's something that we can try to capture through research. So it is to that end that we ask the research question, does providing adults with authentic experiential learning in their own context within a global sustainability framework impact their sustainability attitudes and behaviors? So why focus on attitudes and behaviors? There are two main theories in psychology that relate our unit development and expected outcomes to our study design. The theory of self-efficacy and the theory of planned behavior. The theory of self-efficacy suggests that a person's beliefs about their capacity to execute behaviors and affect situations impacts their behaviors. For example, people might not do something if they don't think they'll be successful at it. The theory of planned behavior suggests that behaviors are largely determined by the interaction between attitudes, subjective norms, and perceived control, which relates back to self-efficacy theory. And those things shape the behavioral intentions, which in turn shape the actual behaviors. I think I have, sorry. Okay. These two theories relate to our experiential learning framework and experience, because, as Penny has laid out, the experiential learning is intended to increase agency and self-efficacy. And then by reinforcing those experiences through reflective observation and abstract conceptualization through unit content and the framing of the Sustainable Development Goals, we hope to shift student attitudes around sustainability and their place within it, which can in turn impact their intended and then actual behaviors. So the feedback we've been getting suggests that some of these changes in self-efficacy and agency, sustainability attitudes, and behaviors are actually happening. These quotes from Living with Fire on the right and Backyard Biodiversity on the left show some examples. I've highlighted agency comments in blue, attitude in green, and behaviors in purple. So students talk about changes to self-efficacy and agency through the units. They feel confident and capable after taking the class. Students describe changes to attitudes and paying more attention to the biodiversity around them. And students describe a range of changes to their own behaviors or those of others. They've made changes to their backyard. They've planted things while neglecting their studies, but they came back to it, so that's okay. They have joined their local fire service, undertaken additional training, and gone on to inspire and engage others in their sustainability pursuits. So it does seem like for some people, these units are changing their attitudes and behaviors and suggest that students may, as Cohen and Uito said, actually use their capabilities in ways that improve sustainability in the world, which is an outcome I think we can all hope for. But as researchers, we are researchers at heart, and we know that anecdotes on unit surveys aren't necessarily generalizable. So we wanted to test this rigorously. And if the units are creating real impacts, and indeed if they are not, we want to understand why. So our proposed study design follows a before-after control intervention mixed methods survey design. Students will be surveyed before and after completion of the units, and we're hoping to incorporate a survey before and after students complete the entire course and diploma, but we actually have no allocation or support for that yet, so baby steps. We will also recruit a reference group through social media, our networks and listservs, who undertake the same survey in the same timeframes to serve as a control for the student intervention group. The idea with this sort of design is that any changes in the intervention group above and beyond any changes seen in the control group is likely to be due to the intervention itself, in this case, taking these units. We will use a validated sustainability consciousness questionnaire to quantify shifts in sustainability knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. And we'll add on some targeted questions about the features of each unit to understand why we see any shifts that we do. We'll also ask some open-ended questions, such as, what features of this unit do you feel impacted your sustainability attitudes and behaviors? And do you feel any differently about your ability to live sustainably now that you've taken this unit? And those will be thematically analyzed for a richer understanding of the impacts of the unit. So our hope with this presentation is that it will contribute an example of an online curriculum design that may be a leverage point for sustainability behavior change. We offer a potential study design to quantify changes in sustainability knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors that may occur for students through engaging with these units. We're currently in the process of writing out the research proposal for the ethics application. Therefore, we warmly welcome any feedback, both about the design of the units, which we're always aiming to improve, and on the design of the research project, intending to understand the impacts of the units. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to the questions and discussion that come after this presentation.
Thank you, ladies. Joanne said that that was one of your first presentations. You both spoke absolutely beautifully. Very clear, very cogent, obviously very passionate, and that's exactly where you should be. 5 years postdocs is awesome. Absolutely amazing.
I totally agree. Gosh.
Joanne put a couple of interesting questions up.
Oh, well, yes. I thought I'll ask you a question just so you can have some practice answering, because I know you know the answer.
Okay, here's the Dorothy Dix. Off we go. How important and what benefits are the theories of learning to your curriculum design? Actually, I'm really interested in that because you both as you went through, obviously were interested in communicating sustainability really well. Then you've gone and realised post that there's all these theories that you've actually embraced without knowing it. And people of my generation, I won't put you in there, Joanne, had no teaching training, and and also good teachers just do that in a natural way. They don't have to relate that to theory. So yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Do you want to start with that one?
I mean, I think certainly as we're trying to understand that why, I mean, hopefully, if we can measure whether our students actually are leading to changes in behaviour and practices, then I think we do need some framework for that to build that understanding. And particularly as, like we all know, and I've certainly had experience of this myself in various contexts, including, being a facilitator for corporate sustainability and things like that, like transmitting the knowledge isn't enough. So if we're achieving more through these units, then what is it? One are we? Because we can learn about biodiversity and think it's great until the cows come home, but that often doesn't actually translate into change. So are we actually achieving that? And if so, what's different? What's new? Is it this practical hands-on experience, or is it something else entirely? So I think that's, for me, why it's important.
Yeah. And my answer to how important are the theories of learning to our curriculum design, my answer is I don't know. And I say that because I don't know, but because I feel like there are several different important theories and things that we can draw on for trying to understand what's happening here. So there are theories of behavior change and theories of change to understand why, these learnings and experiences with these units may change behaviors. We've drawn on sort of, theories, psychology theories of how to change attitudes and behaviors. With that sort of goal, that view to wanting to impact that. And I don't know yet how those all integrate with the theories of learning, so there's these different fields that we're sort of drawing from. I'm not yet sure how they all sort of fit together in designing a curriculum. But I am happy to be told. Here's some recommendations from experts.
Well, look at me. Well, I guess the other question that I have then, with respect to your units in particular, is how many students are doing them, and do they do it? Do they do both units concurrently, or can they do it sort of part-time so that it's over a period of time? How does it, how does you dovetail and learning?
Yeah, so students, so they're both part of the diploma, which is 8 subjects, or there's a certificate version, which is 4, and almost all the students are part-time. So most students, I would say, are taking 1 or 2 subjects per semester, and they can take them in any order. So there may be students doing our units concurrently, but I would say that most of our students probably do both units, but not necessarily, but probably not necessarily concurrently. And in terms of how many students, there's about, across all of the cohorts this semester, there's been about 500, I think, taking both this year.
Huge, isn't it?
Taking each, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that is impressive.
I could just add to that they are, there's some of the more popular units in the diploma, so they're not core, so not everyone has to take them, but a lot of students do take these ones, and we do get a lot of positive feedback that they've really enjoyed it, it's fun, they learned a lot, it's impacting them in lots of different ways. And so it's heartening that even though we came to this.
The most important thing, if the students are coming, they're telling the next cohort, they're all enjoying it, they're feeling that they've benefited. You guys have created a winner. There's
we feel like by some measures of success, they're doing well, but we know that student enjoyment doesn't equal student retention, in the, knowledge retention, it doesn't equal behavior change. And if that's what we're sort of wanting to shoot for, then we have to figure other ways to test that than how many students are there and how much do they like it.
If they're enjoying it and they're getting more, that will build communities, and that's really what we're doing. Sustainability is about community, right?
That's actually a good point, Danielle, and we hadn't really...
No, I'm not Daniela. She's sitting in the corner. I left my mobile at home, so I couldn't...
Okay, that's what I was asking in the beginning. I was like, so Daniela, tell me about yourself, and you weren't responding.
Liz the loser who left her mobile.
Okay. Oh, I was going to say, so that's a good point, not Danielle. Because they are actually, through the discussion boards and stuff, so they are interacting with one another, and there are some communities forming, and they do apparently go off and make Facebook groups sometimes, like the different semesters will make their own Facebook groups to continue interacting and learning from each other about how their backyard design is going and what they're doing and how many birds they're counting and probably similar things with fire. So that is, and we haven't really thought about that part so much, but they are sort of creating communities around.
Yeah, or even, more informally, as I said, certainly had students telling me from Living with Fire that they've gone and, set up, they've been talking to their neighbours, et cetera, et cetera. They've been encouraging people to come and do the unit, I suppose, as you said, and those sorts of things. So, and I mean, that's, in terms of what are we trying to aim as part of those units, I mean, certainly, it's great to have people do individual things in their backyards, but we really need to scale it up to that community level to actually, to really, in some ways, what are we trying to do is achieve those communities of practice.
And if you look at what those communities have actually done, like what improvements have they made, that speaks to your students actually retaining the knowledge that you're talking about.
That's true.
So sometimes you can't just put a scale on it, right? It's not about the exam or the assignment. It's about looking months later and seeing what that impact actually is, which is much more difficult to put a number on. I'm so impressed with you, ladies.
Yeah, me too.
No, that was terrific. And what was your second part there? To understand the impacts. Oh, well, we've basically talked about that, haven't we? The impacts on the students. Yeah. So I know that Joanne said that she's no longer employed at the university. What's your sort of status, ladies? What's the...
rolling 1 year contracts, isn't that the slash casual contract?
Yes. Yeah, well, actually, I'll give you a little bit of heart there. One of the ladies who did a PhD when I was doing my honours back in the 1980s. I know you weren't born then, but anyway.
All right, 83. We're 84. We're older than we look.
We're so young and youthful. Here we go. Okay. Well, anyway, this particular lady, I'm sure she won't mind me naming her. Sue Fletcher is her name. Was ordered. She was on 1 year contracts from when she finished her PhD in 1988 until about 8 years ago. And this year she won the Order of Australia for her research. So she was on 1 year contracts for 20 years.
I don't feel like that's very heartening. That tells me that even you are so good that they would Order of Australia. What hope do we have?
and the success, and she's such an inspirational speaker and lady, and she's fabulous. So 1 year contracts does not mean your research can't get somewhere really awesome. Yeah, look her up. Sue Fletcher. It's amazing. All right, I think I've talked over your 10. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
The last thing I would add is just if anyone does watch this later on and would like to has any thoughts, please do get in touch and share them. We are very keen for feedback and input.
That's the University of Tasmania.
Yes, that's right. Yes, with our email address, just our names separated by .utas.edu.au. So send in your thoughts and advice and questions.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific, ladies. Enjoy the rest of the day, and well done for your first presentation.